Okay, I would like to call the DeSoto Planning Commission meeting to order. November 27th, 2018. Can we have a roll call, please?
Manson,
Present.
Garrett,
Here.
Hempel,
Here.
Lane, here, McPherson,
Here.
Schultz,
Here.
and Commissioner Fisher is out of town tonight.
Okay. I want to add this to everybody in the audience. We're being filmed and videoed tonight. And I don't know that you're going to see this on TV9 News, but who knows. So if there's any side discussion in the back of the room, it'll be picked up. So if you can turn your cell phones off, and if you have to talk to your neighbor or whatever, whisper, but would appreciate no side discussions going on. So that said, we'll move on to, we have an agenda for tonight. And does anybody have any additions or modifications to the agenda?
I'd like to make a motion that we amend the meeting date for December, since that falls on Christmas.
Okay, we'll add that to the agenda under general business, item E, to vote on the Christmas meeting, or the December meeting, which happens to fall on Christmas. Okay, then approval of minutes of the Planning Commission held on October 23rd, 2018. Has everybody had a chance to read those? And if so, can I have a motion to approve in a second?
Motion to approve.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. And I abstain because I wasn't at that meeting. Are there any disclosures of conflicts of interest? Has anybody had any side discussions with anybody on any topic in front of us tonight? Hearing none, I'll move to item D, disclosure of outside communications regarding Planning Commission business. Has anybody had any? Very good. We'll move on to item E, what we just added about the December meeting. Anybody have any thoughts about meeting on Christmas?
Bad idea.
Bad idea. Okay. Can I have a motion and a second, and we'll vote on that?
Make a motion that we cancel the meeting for December unless something really important, really important comes up.
But not for the 25th.
Yeah, but not for the 25th.
Yeah.
Brad, do we have anything that's pending?
As far as I know, nothing on this. Of course, we're
Still early.
November meetings.
Yeah.
That can change.
Okay, if we had to do,
We'll see if we can get on that.
okay, so can I have a, all in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. No meeting in December, unless it's to save Christmas or something. All right.
You'd have to move it a week ahead.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Call to public. I see we have a crowd here tonight, and this is your chance, if you're in the crowd, to get up and say something. This is not about any business in front of us. It's just about what you think of the sidewalks on 91st, or why we did this or did that or didn't do something. Just general stuff. If you would like to get up and speak, we would appreciate it. Hearing no takers on the call to public, we'll move to item 5, the public hearing, which is a text amendment for digital highway monument signs. What we're going to do, the procedure we're going to go through, we're going to have staff present it to the board. We'll kick it around a little bit, and then we'll open up the public session and get public input from anybody in the audience that would like to comment on our proposed digital highway sign. So can we please start with staff?
Sure. Thank you, commissioners. This is an item we've spoken about on at least a couple previous occasions here at the Planning Commission meeting, most recently at the October meeting, when we discussed the current version of the proposed text amendment. For the audience's sake, the item on the agenda tonight is to include within our regulations a provision that would allow essentially what you would probably recognize as a digital highway billboard sign. I mean, it's the most common term for it. We've taken billboard out of it, and we're calling these just digital highway advertising signs. This amendment would allow an applicant to come in and propose one of these signs along K-10 within the city of DeSoto under a special use permit process that requires a specific application for a specific sign and location and size and setbacks to come before the Planning Commission again as part of a public hearing item, and then ultimately would be approved by the City Council. So if this is to occur, this would just clear the way for the possibility, basically. The public hearing is to add this language to our zoning regulations. And you know, not to recap or rehash too much of the discussion that's already taken place, but in essence, what this would allow is a sign that's 672 square foot in size for the electronic message board sign, electronic message board portion of the sign, but it would have to be landscaped and have some architectural interest to it. It couldn't just be a structure on a pole like you might see in some other places. This is a very similar discussion to what we've had on a number of occasions over the last several years, but we felt this one was different enough in that the requirements stipulate that there has to be a community benefit, community involvement in terms of free advertising for the city's purposes on the sign itself. The sign has to be of a monument-type structure that is not just a pole structure, but has to be landscaped and have some architectural interest to the sign. So we thought those were enough differences from the previous discussions to have this discussion again. So in most basic terms, I've pulled up on the screen the general parameters of what the requirements stipulate. The maximum height would be 35 feet. The total sign, again, the sign face area is 672 square feet. That would be 14 foot by 48 feet, about the size of a tractor trailer. It would be double-sided. Most of these signs are. There are restrictions. KDOT has restrictions, and the regulation also has restrictions on the illumination levels, the changing of the text, the restrictions on flashing signs. But there are no restrictions on content other than what could be considered vulgar or offensive content, which would obviously be prohibited. The other caveat is that the sign does have to have city advertising for free up to one rotation out of 8 throughout a 24-hour period. We do have specific recommendations for building materials. You know, it has to be stucco, glass, concrete, durable building materials. And then the review process would be relatively subjective on the part of the Planning Commission and City Council. If one comes in, we'd have to make sure that that it looks nice, essentially. I'm going to leave it at that for my presentation. I won't go through all the red lines. Planning Committee, we looked at this in quite a bit of detail at the last meeting. The version you have here on the screen and the ones you have in your packets are the same one we looked at last month. The red line versions essentially are changes between the first time we looked at this back in June or July and now. So we talked about this and made some adjustments along the way. So with that, I'll turn it back over to you, Chairman, to call the public hearing and have the public input and then further the discussion after that.
Okay, thank you, Mike. Does anybody have any questions for staff at this point in time? We'll come back to staff after the public hearing, but I think it's. I think I need to point one thing I want to point out. I mean, a couple things just to throw out there, that the sign can go right against the right of way, which is kind of nicety, you know, can be on a building lot, so there's no setback. It can basically abut the right of way because, you know, that's who we're advertising to. And just so everybody knows, this sign came from city council to us. We didn't, we are not inventing, we are not, we are trying to set some regulations that we think everybody can live with, a decent product to display, put on display and kind of to represent the city a little bit. This is, an elected official has to decide if we're going to do this. So all we're doing tonight is setting the regulations, how high it is, how big it is, and those kind of things. With that said, I guess nobody else has any input at this point in time. We'll open the public hearing, and anybody who would like to speak for or against the sign, please come up to the podium and say your name and address. And we are all ears up here on the Planning Commission. So are there any takers? I see some smiles, but I don't see. Well, okay, you all must be here for something else. Then we will. That's the only thing I can figure out. So if there are no takers, we'll close the. Wait a minute. Okay.
All right, I'll be the guinea pig. I'll go first.
Okay.
My name is Rick Brandt. I live at 31375 West 102nd Street. I'd like to voice my concern over the sign. My wife and I drove to St. Louis this past weekend on I-70. There are at least one of these signs on I-70. They're distracting. They're gigantic. Mike did a great job of describing the actual size, but they're bigger than that when they're all lit up. So that's one concern. I think they will be distracting for drivers on K10. The other thing I guess I would say, I know in discussions over the last month, there was some discussion over business owners in DeSoto and whether or not, excuse me, they would advertise on the sign. There was concern over the expense. I mean, that was stated last month. So, in my opinion, I don't think this does anything for the city of DeSoto. I don't see what benefit. I mean, do you really want people to come to DeSoto days outside of residents of DeSoto? I suppose that's good for the vendors, but I'm not sure that's really what you want. So anyway, that's just my opinion. I'd like to voice my concern.
Thank you, Rick. Well, just to comment on my part, these signs are legal. They are not, we're not breaking the law. We're not doing something that's wrong, but it's a community decision. When I say community, it's an elected official decision whether we have one or not. And are they distracting? Maybe they are, sir. I don't have a strong opinion on that, but anybody else got any? Anybody else like to get up and speak? Yes, sir.
You guys know me, Rob Daniels, City Council member. Couple things to address, just comments and things. In researching this, I'm the one that's actually requested to bring this to the committee and to the commission. In doing so, I researched a lot of the objections. And in looking further at it, the size of the sign, Mike mentioned it as a billboard sign. Perspective matters greatly. And in researching that, as you come off K10 and you see the Lexington Avenue sign that announces the KDOT, hey, this is Lexington Avenue. How big is the sign? As a matter of fact, that sign hides the Super 8 motel at one point in time. Believe it or not. So because the sign is directly on the highway, those signs are fairly large. They are more than capable of hiding complete buildings. The location of the billboard sign that we're talking about would be off in the offset setback. As a matter of fact, in looking at it, that same Lexington Avenue sign would actually hide the entire billboard. So while it sounds large initially, it also, with where it's located, perspective offset from the highway will not actually be as appearing large as most of the street signs announcing McDonald's sign, Lexington Avenue sign, items like that. These billboards are prevalent and becoming prevalent. If you go, there's one right at Metcalf and I-35. There's one if you're on I-70 going into Kansas City, Kansas from 435. There's about 3 or 4 of them. What I absolutely don't want is to look like St. Joseph, where they've got 5 or 6 of these signs in the middle of town, full billboard signs on poles. We've heard the comment about looking like Branson. We don't want to look like Branson, but if you think about that, Branson starts with the billboards at Springfield, and it's 90 miles of billboards. If it's going to be that way, we don't have control over 90 miles. We have control in what's inside our city district, inside our boundaries, inside of our borders. At most, currently, 3 to 4 of these signs under the regulation would be capable of happening if the demand was even there for it. I'd have no problem if you took away the words on one side of the highway and made it a radius. Wyandotte County, they actually allow the billboards within 1,000 feet of each other, not 4,000 feet. They allow them up to 40 feet with a maximum of 80 feet in certain areas. So the regulations that we're working with within the text amendment are more than reasonable, more than capable. If you actually do drive by and look at these, there's no motion allowed by KDOT. And the dimming at night, because I do go routinely up to Kansas City, Kansas, to the National Guard Armory at least once or twice a month in the evening at nighttime, the dimming is such that it's not glaring in your face. It's not what it was 5, 10, 15 years ago when they first came out and you drove by and were blinded by what you're seeing. So if you haven't seen them and driven by them at night, take a look at it. One of the things I was looking for in working with this was a benefit to the city. And in doing so, I didn't foresee if the text amendment puts in place that any of these signs that we look at or consider, and again, this is just saying the foundation, it still has to come before you guys and before the council for approval through a special use permit to even get to the point where it would be able to be constructed. But it has to be that they're acting in good faith, negotiating with the city. At which point, the foundation being laid and working with the individuals that would like to see this happen as a venue that I saw capable of it would be things like the city would have 1 rotation out of every 8. So 1/8 of the time on the billboards permanently to the city at no cost, whether it be to advertise DeSoto Days, which we do get a lot of people coming in from out of the city for that. We have very successful DeSoto Days and Carnival, as attested to by the DeSoto Days Committee at the last council meeting. You also have the capability of live streaming, so the schools could actually have scores up there, or more than that, using it for emergency management. The live streaming capabilities would allow us to basically say, hey, there's 9 cars off the road between here and K7, K7, which just happened. So there's a lot of capabilities that are capable of happening in that realm and working with, in good faith, with potential of it.
Who would put that on there, Rob?
The streaming capability, my understanding is it's probably through an RSS feed, so it'd be easy for city or school district to simply send out an RSS feed to it. And in doing so, that's one of the things I saw with this was the billboard for the city, being able to utilize it for the school district as well, to help promote the school district and what's going on. That means advertising what's happening in the city, but also being able to communicate potentially with our residents. Because I know living at north of K10 between Kill Creek and Waverly, we end up coming to take our kids to school across K10 all the time. When we had the Parks and Rec meetings, 3 of them, one of the common consistent themes was we didn't know what was happening. And this would not be a end-all be-all solution, but it'd be one more peg in potential communication and letting 40,000 people plus a day that go on K10 know we've got stuff going on. So,
Rob, just curious, on the size. Do you know the corporate woods sign on
I know which one you're talking
435? It
I'm not
sits
sure the
down there.
size.
It's like we measured it in here one night, and it seemed like it was 60 feet wide and 10 feet tall. And I imagine a lot of people in the audience have driven by that. Agreed. It doesn't flash, or there's no color to it, but you know, a sign that size just kind of, there's an awfully big sky out there is what I'm saying. You know, they just kind of disappear. So I'm not so much worried about this. I mean, personally, not worried about the size of it.
Like I said, the size came into perspective for me when we actually looked at visual lines of where you would see it, and realized in taking a couple of pictures where it would be, oh wait, the Lexington Avenue sign would actually hide it entirely at one point.
And another question. You've looked at the regulations we've come up with. And is there anything in there you question? Is this adequate?
I believe
Less-
this covers the concerns and foundation to allow them to bring a proposal to you and to the council that has at least a foundation of restrictions and guidelines to make it to where it's not just a billboard on a pole, but it's aesthetically pleasing and has benefit to the city and community as a whole.
You know, this is kind of uncharted territory. I don't recall ever seeing any other jurisdictions, regulations. We kind of rolled our own cigarettes on these. We did the best we could.
And
And
that's where I went back and looked at Wyandotte County,
Yeah.
knowing that they've got some. I will tell you, this is uncharted territory in one sense, in that in all the cities and all the research I've done, very few have any laws or capability to say that for it to be in our community, there has to be benefit to the community.
okay, as a general trend in society, another question. I sure get a lot of pop-ups when I'm on the internet. Okay, so is this? I don't want this sign to be a pop-up, and there's no delete button as I'm driving along. You understand what I mean, where I'm coming from on that? That maybe these kind of signs are going to be, they're the wave of the future, maybe, I don't know, just like the advertising pop-up when you're trying to look something up on the internet. So we've given the guidelines how to do it. The council needs to rule it. So that's all I have. Any further questions?
Do we have anybody else that wants to talk?
Well, we still have somebody at the
Right.
podium.
No, no more.
Rob,
yeah.
do you know if, like Lenexa and Olathe, Lawrence, if they have any guidelines as far as those, since they're also on the 10 highway?
Olathe has some signs. I don't know if they have electronic yet. The closest in Johnson County I found was the one right at 435 and Metcalf, and it is exactly on the north corner of that whole interchange. That is an electronic billboard, which that would be in the Marion area at that point probably. So beyond that, I'm not really sure. I know Wyandotte County has quite a few of them scattered around. You get to Jackson County, there's quite a few scattered around. There are some traditional billboards throughout the rest of Johnson County. They have not transitioned, from what I know yet, to digital, although my guess is that's only a matter of time.
Would you happen to know what, when around Halloween, they had a temporary sign down there where the pumpkin patch was? Would you have any idea about what size that was?
I do not know what size it was. I do know that it did not auto dim like the requirements for the billboard would be, and it had motion video on it, which is not permissible on the type of signs that we're talking about. So, yeah, I'm not sure.
I was just trying to get a size perspective.
I think the sign in Eudora, at the Lawrence Memorial Annex is, pretty sure it's like 14 by about 5. And it's I drove my car up and took a photograph of my car in the foreground. It wasn't as long as my truck, you know. And you don't know that sign. You got to look for it almost, you know. Maybe because the trees are there or whatever. But that particular sign's not distracting, but it is pretty small. No other questions for Brad?
The small businesses would have opportunity through the chamber, because the chamber would have first right refusal on the billboards, and then they could divide it up where maybe not every rotation, but every third or fourth, to bring it down to a price point that small businesses here in DeSoto can afford.
Well, I guess one final question. Is this the overall benefit to the community will be, in your eyes, what?
Exposure and communication.
Help businesses communicate what's going on.
And there's been interest in the past. The DeSoto Chamber is fully on board with this and appreciates and likes the concept and idea and is behind it. In the past, there's been letters from Hutamaki and some other employers and businesses that have expressed interest in being able to advertise hiring or information. So there's been some in the past.
Okay.
Couldn't come up with letters right off, but there has been some.
All right. Thank you, Brad.
One more question. You state that the Chamber of Commerce has the first right of refusal. Where is that documented that clearly states
That
it?
would be in the special use permit.
Okay, perfect.
And that's where, again, we're dealing with the text amendment that sets kind of foundation, and under 4C, negotiating in good faith, that would be hammered out. So a lot of what we talked about would be hammered out, but it is in email communications at this point that it is agreed to.
Okay, thanks.
Hey, Rob, you know that when a sign like this goes up, we have no, we can't judge content, that the sign owner can put anything up there he wants, and we can't do anything about it. And what do you do if if the owner decides to sell this sign?
In the sale of the sign, if it happens, the terms, at least negotiate with the city for getting it there, my understanding would continue forward as an agreement. And as far as selling advertising, we can't control that, but right now, if we need to go down that path, we also are gonna have to relook at selling advertising on our ball fields. Because if somebody from Lawrence wants to come advertise on our ball fields, who are we to discriminate and say no? So, I mean, there's gonna be that where this is being done for private entities, so at that point, we can't control it, but we can at least make sure the chamber has first right of refusal so that they can advertise locally. We have exposure as well.
One more question, Rob. I put a dollar sign down here on my piece of paper. Is there a measurable benefit to the city? Like is advertising taxable at 9.8% or whatever, and the city gets a portion of that? I'm just curious. Is there money to the city, or maybe I'm just curious. That doesn't impact whether we approve this.
Yeah, no, I was trying to think. I'm not sure if that's taxable or not.
Property
It's
tax.
what's that?
The value of the sign, the property tax, right?
Yeah,
There's
no,
a
the
value
property
to the
tax
sign,
would be.
There would be, I'm sorry, Rick Walker, 31755 West 89. But
I'm wondering about the advertising revenue. If
I
that's
don't know
taxable.
I don't know that answer, but I know just the physical improvement has to be
Right.
taxable because it is a physical improvement on property, so there would be a property tax value to it.
Well, I mean, advertising is big money. I mean, you know, you pay a lot to put stuff out there. And so somebody's going to pay somebody to put stuff on this sign. I'm just curious if that's.
Get it
But
first.
your private state gets all that money, that tax revenue.
Okay. Well, somebody gets it.
Well, it'd be just like a landlord. Landlord they own the
Yeah.
property, so they're gonna get the rent from it, so.
Yeah.
They invested, so they're gonna get the money from the revenues.
Okay. So there is a local sales tax. That's what I was just curious about. Okay. Well, no, that really.
That's not applicable to our.
That's not applicable to our regulations. I would you're up here, you're smiling, you're answering questions. I just thought I'd So, anybody else?
Mike, last month I asked you whether
you.
we had any control with a special use over the area that advertising could be sold for that sign. You were going to talk to Patrick.
Well, yeah, and I think the conclusion is no. I mean, that would be regulate. So I'm not
talking about regulating what it says, just the area that they can pull information to put on that sign.
Right.
That's got nothing to do with wording.
The test is if you have to ask what the sign is going to say in order to determine if it's in conformance with our regulations or in conformance with a special use permit. If you have to ask the question, what does the sign say? Then that regulation or that requirement is not constitutional. In other words, that gets to the content of the sign. So the answer would be no, we can't. We probably wouldn't be able to have that type of restriction. Now, someone would have to challenge it in court, and in the context of a special use permit, maybe the applicant agrees to that voluntarily, and we could make that work. But legally, I think it could be challenged.
Thank you.
Okay, so any other input from the audience tonight on the electronic billboard signs? Hearing none, I'll close the public hearing and let's discuss it amongst the board members. So to reiterate, we're just providing a means for a sign, and it's easy to get hung up in other stuff. So just with respect to the criteria that has been placed in front of you, the red text being a change for the electronic verbal message board. Does anybody have anything they want to add or take away? Or okay, well,
I think, and Rob alluded to this as well, maybe not having as many signs allowed, because that's a lot of signs in my, because there's 2 on each. Didn't we say we could have 2 on each side?
Yeah, that's right. There's a 4,000-foot separation, yeah. So within DeSoto, on each side, looks like it's physically possible to have 4 of these ultimately, 2 on each side.
Would not they have to rezone commercial?
That's right.
So I mean, it's like it's not automatic. You know, wherever the sign goes, got to be commercial zoning. Okay. And my way of thinking, we pretty much, this is kind of right in the center of a commercial strip. I don't know if we could go 4,000 feet to the west. I mean, it'd be a lot of growth. You know what I mean? It's not even annexed into the city. 4,000 feet is beyond the city limits.
Yeah, it would be from the area of the Commerce Park, like where everybody's thinking about. Yeah.
Yeah, I assume there was one sign right in the middle of Commerce Park, for example, and 4,000 feet both ways would be beyond the city. So I don't.
To the west, it would be. To the east, it'd be about the Kill Creek interchange.
4,000 feet. Boy, it doesn't.
Yeah, we looked at it last time.
Okay. But it'd have to rezone commercial.
Correct.
To have another sign up there.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, is anybody comfortable with these text amendments to make a motion?
I think, Chairman, if I could, just to clarify, you're recommending to the City Council, yeah. And I think what we'd like to do is either recommend affirmative to adopt these or recommend to deny the change. Either way, we do want to take it forward to the council because it originated with them.
Right.
So we'll take it forward to them regardless.
We're not approving, we're recommending.
Yeah.
Well, I'm kind of on the fence about this. And I see a lot of positives. I've got a lot of doubt, but since no one has come forward in the public and really versed that displeasure other than one person at our public hearing, I'm ready to go forward with it.
We've discussed
Let's just
this.
start right over. Let's just start. My opinion is, let's just throw opinions out there, each person. I'll start that whether or not we get an electronic verbal message sign, whether we have one or not, it's not on us. We're just providing the means to do it. It's an elected official decision. So when you look at it that way, it's kind of hard to separate those two. So, Ian, just what do you think?
We have discussed this quite a bit from, a year ago when we started this, first got the deal. I think the basics for why we decided the way we did then are still very applicable today. And I think we need to keep that in mind.
What do you think, Mr. Schultz?
The thing that's got me basically is the size of it. I mean, I just have a hard time picturing the sign that big. I know there's been changes on them, but I don't know if we need one that big. I could see one possibly smaller, but the size of a tractor trailer side is just, to me, seems huge. And I do realize that in the proposal it says up to 672 square feet, possibility of a smaller one being applied for. There's got to be a reason Olathe and Lenexa and Eudora and Lawrence haven't come up with one of those.
That's right. Not every community is on board with this type of product.
And once we open that can, it's open.
We're stuck.
Well, yeah, I wonder, is this a sign of, is this where we're going? You know, back to the pop-up computer message pop-up thing that
Hope
you know,
not.
yeah, hopefully not. Okay, well,
I mean, everything's
Well, you got
hackable
my
these
opinion.
days.
you've got my opinion. Okay, I've given you my opinion. Let's move it around.
I think our text amendment that we're proposing or possibly recommending to pass on lays the groundwork for someone to submit it, but also allows us enough opportunity once it is submitted for further review to make the decisions at the time of submission through the special permit process. So with the text amendment, I'm okay with it because, again, we have to see it all again in a submission before it's actually approved. So.
What do you think, Mr. Garrett?
But it's kind of a nice drive after you get past Cedar Creek to Lawrence. And I just can't see coming down the highway here, and here's this thing that looks like a semi parked out on the edge of the road. I've stated before in the past, I don't agree with this. When it was first brought to us here this last month, it was going to be incorporated with a monument sign, and I don't think we need a billboard attached to a monument sign that says DeSoto. And I was against it from the very first 2 years ago when we brought this up, and I'm against it now.
Okay.
I think we're going to open up a Pandora's box.
Okay. Well, in light of all those comments, is there anybody who would like to make a motion that we send this on, that we approve it and send it to the city council? Or we disapprove it and send it to city council?
I'll make a motion that we approve it and send it to city council for their approval.
Okay, do we have a second?
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Can we have a roll call vote, please, Lana?
Okay. Manson,
Yes.
Garrett,
No,
Schultz,
No.
McPherson,
No.
Chairman,
Yes.
Lane.
Yes.
Thank you, commissioners?
That motion does not carry.
It does not. We
Yeah.
have
So-
3-3.
So no action was taken. Before we go making more motions, might I suggest, I would maybe suggest that since we have a commissioner absent, maybe we table this item until the next planning commission meeting, until you can have the swing vote present. Otherwise, I think we'll have a series of motions that die and then no action taken on the issue.
Would anybody like to make a motion that we table this?
I'll make a motion, we table it until we have a full group.
Second.
Okay, and before we vote, just to send a message forward, what would change my mind is nothing would change my mind. I'm for it. I think it's the wave of the future. What would change anybody else's mind who voted no to vote for it? What would change?
Mine would be basically the overall size of it.
More discussion on size, so you're comfortable with.
I know at some point it's going to happen, I'm sure.
Yeah.
But I don't know that it has to be of that magnitude.
That
Yeah.
length and width. Okay.
But it could be 14 by 48 or also 19 feet tall by 35 feet long. It still ends up right at 672 square feet. You know, whether any way we could drop that down, I would be comfortable with it.
Well,
Smaller
maybe
size.
some more examples or whatever, or a visual from the freeway to the sign, so you had a better feel for that size. Okay. How about you, Ian?
My problem is something that we can't do a thing about, and that's the fact we have no control over what goes on that sign.
Okay, now
That's
that's a political, or what's the word I'm looking for? That's
Well, it's already governed.
Yeah, exactly. He's governed by the feds. They've
Yeah.
said this, and that's fine. That's what it is. And because we don't have the control, anything can go on that sign. And we already know that most of the small businesses in this town cannot afford to pay for time on it.
Unless they go through the chamber.
They're still going to have to pay for it.
Well, it could be a much more reasonable price.
Yeah, and it'd be far less time that they would get on it. And when would that time be? Which it should be through the rotation. I agree with that. But their time will be, and their number of, they may get one advertising every 2 hours. Does them no good. They're spending several $100s a week and getting nothing out of it, basically, or very little. Since we have no control over what goes on it, that's why I'm against it.
time out. Those are elected official things you're talking about, in my opinion. But I can't. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I know. It's
I'm
the
used-
feds have set that up, and that's the
Well-
way it is, and that's what we have to deal with.
Yeah.
And it's because of that I don't like the idea of the board.
Okay, we're voting on the physical requirements for a board should one be placed.
If we pass these,
Yeah.
the sign board will go up.
Well,
There's no reason
not
these.
necessarily.
Yeah, because these changes were asked for so that a signboard of that nature could go up. Otherwise, we wouldn't be doing this. We've already done this once and voted against it, and now we're back where we were. And so I'm sure that if we pass this, that's what will happen. So that's what I'm thinking of.
So can I paraphrase? Nothing will change your mind on.
Nothing we could do or say would change my mind. Correct, because we have no control
Okay.
over the wording.
Okay.
So.
Anything? Well, you voted for it, Mr. Garrett. What would change your mind?
I'm with Ian.
Yeah. Okay. There is a motion and a second for tabling this item and bringing it back at our next meeting, which I guess would be in January. Can we have a roll call vote, please?
I did.
Hanson,
Yes.
Garrett,
Yes.
Lane,
Yes.
McPherson,
Yes.
Schultz,
Yes.
Chairman.
Yes.
Thank you, Commissioners. The motion
Okay,
carries.
well, woohoo, that was, public hearing, item 5. Item 6, old business. The final plat for Arcadia Estates, if we could have staff report, please.
Good evening, Commissioners. What you have before you is the preliminary plat for Arcadia Estates. This was actually brought to you initially as a rezoning for this property at 95th and Waverly about a year ago. It was rezoned and annexed into the city under Part O, rural subdivision regulation, rural suburban zoning at that time. And in July, the applicant is here tonight. And if you've got any additional questions after my presentation, certainly feel free to ask them their comments as well. In July, they submitted a preliminary plat to us. It went through several rounds of staff review. And it was brought to you for, we did our public hearing process and 200-foot buffer. We have to notify residents in the area of the pending preliminary plat. Therefore, we're at the point now where it's, we feel like the staff has gone through the applicant's submittals and resubmittals enough times, and they've met our conditions of our subdivision regulation. So I'll kind of go through some of those for you tonight. First of all, starting with the density of the site, there's going to be 26 lots. It's on 36 acres, so it's a little bit less than one residence per acre. As you can see, as we have on the screen, it's 2 entrances, 2 cul-de-sacs, a fairly straight shot between the 2 ends. There are some utility easements that we worked with the applicant to make sure that the building footprint met our code. You have to have a minimum of 1 acre buildable site that does not include easements or any kind of road services. So that's some of the initial submittals had more lots, and then we had to pare that down a little bit. And anyway, they have included a table within the preliminary plat that does show that they meet this requirement. The reason that is such a stringent requirement on our end is because there won't be sanitary sewers through the city's system. There will be private wastewater systems, and with that you have to have 1 acre of buildable area for those to work and function properly. Other utilities within the area, actually it's in Rural Water District 7, so it will not be on city water. Atmos Gas will be serving the area. Also through our annexation and zoning process, city council level, the applicant will be installing 2 conduits for internet fiber throughout the site. We will have sidewalks installed per our city code throughout the subdivision. We've also got a easement dedicated to us for a additional potential sidewalk, which will probably be constructed at city expense along Waverly Road.
Brad, can I ask you this?
Yes, Rich.
Well, I thought I'll ask this for you before I forget. Are the sidewalks shown?
There are on there. There's a label. This scale, they're kind of hard to see, but they are. There's a label. I think, Mike, it's towards the.
Are they along?
Yeah, there's the sign or the label, but there is a proposed sidewalk, and that is in part of our
So
requirement.
that's the double line along the edge of the street.
Right.
Yeah, it doesn't look like it
Around
got
the
shaded the
cul-de-sac.
way the legend.
Both
Like-
sides of the street out to 95th, or
No,
One
it's just
side,
one side of the street.
one side of the street. And is there anything along 95th?
Nothing
No,
on 95th.
no. Other than the fact that 95th has got a very wide shoulder on the sides, so when people are out, they do have some fairly comfortable walking road, but it is not. There is no sidewalk along 95th Street.
Okay. Thank you.
Back to the utilities, they also submitted a drainage report, which Mike has reviewed to meet our subdivision regulations for stormwater. He's approved that.
They've also submitted as part of the preliminary plan, landscaping plan, they do need to put in street trees along Waverly, 95th, and interior. I've looked at those, and it does meet our criteria. I mentioned the 20-foot wide pedestrian easement on Waverly. Street names will fall within the county's street name system, so there really isn't going to be much of discussion on that. That's dictated by Johnson County and the emergency management system. Preliminary grading plan is also included within the preliminary plat. It's a rather flat site. There is some degree of elevation change, but it's been under cultivation for several years. There is a row of trees on the western edge and on the southern edge, fairly thicket area of trees. The applicant has not indicated whether those trees will remain, but it's not part of our code to look at that as far as existing vegetation for this type of submittal.
Can I stop you again for a second?
Sure,
On the storm drainage, is there one of those lots that's like detention or retention?
The lot, it's actually right here, and you can see up on the screen, the areas to the, I guess that would be to the north and east, and then along the sections between the Street 1 and Street 3, there's a graded area that includes, that'll be the detention location for stormwater.
The detention really is just this at the northeast corner. This is just a drainage swale to get the water there. But
So the whole subdivision goes to that one corner?
not the whole thing. So the way our regulations state is that the overall runoff from the entire development can't exceed that of the previous runoff, essentially. So you can over detain here in the northeast corner and allow some of the other areas to release. So in this case, the majority drains toward the northeast, but there is a section that drains toward the southeast as well. But the grading plan has actually, we're increasing the amount of runoff that goes toward the northeast just through the street grading.
So both
Overall, the runoff from the entire site is less than it will be less after the development occurs with stormwater detention than it is today in crop.
will it be a point load from the two streets, from the two connections to Waverly?
Yeah, so the streets will have curb and gutter, enclosed storm sewer. So there will be storm sewer that comes collect off the street and the houses adjacent to, runs along the north-south street and then east along Street 1, and then north and point basically a discharge into the detention facility there.
Did you say there was going to be the same or more water running towards that corner?
No, well, coming out of the detention facility, the peak runoff will be less than it is today.
Okay.
And that's the standard. It has to be at or below the pre-development condition.
Okay. The only reason I'm asking is because when the county had it, that corner was hellacious for flooding.
Yeah.
For runoff.
Yeah.
It was terrible. So.
Yeah, I think this will solve some of that.
Okay. I have to solve a lot of it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, you're right. We've had the same problem since we've had it.
Yeah. Yeah, because it's all farmland. It's not graded correctly to take care of that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, the only utility that the city will be taking care of will be stormwater and streets, sidewalks, things like that. Everything else is rural water, 7, Atmos gas, and I guess Evergy, Westar.
Yeah.
Anyway, that concludes my staff report. I'll stand for any questions, and certainly applicants here tonight if you'd like to ask them anything about the development and what their future plans may be.
Fred, they got on here proposed fire hydrants. You know where they're located?
I think we actually did have a couple shown on there, but
You can't
I
really.
mean, those can be, adjusted. And we can work with the fire marshal on those locations. But typically, they would be at, the intersections of those streets on the corners of Street 1 and 3 within the subdivision itself. maybe one mid-block, since it's a fairly long run.
Okay.
Any further questions for staff? This has been in front of us several times. It's been a lot of discussion. I think the applicant was a little surprised at all the requirements, and I hope they're through that, and I hope this project can move forward, on a positive note. So would anybody like to make a motion? And this does not have this is not a public input item.
That's right. That's not,
So just to
public
let the
hearing.
audience know, we're not calling you up to, this is just so.
Make a motion to, accept the preliminary plat for Arcadian Estates?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. If we can have a roll call vote, please.
Manson,
Yes.
Lane,
Yes.
Schultz,
Yes.
Hemphill,
Yes.
Garrett,
Yes.
McPherson.
Yes.
Thank you, Commissioners. The motion carries.
Okay, item 6A is out of the way. Turn my paper upside down here. Item 7, new business, site plan. Country Village multifamily development. We could start with the staff report.
All right, thanks, Mr. Chairman. Before you have a site plan for Country Village apartment complex, it's actually already zoned appropriately, R3, so that's why there isn't a public hearing process for this as well. Site plans do go before the Planning Commission for approval. It is your authority. It does not go on to the City Council, so this is something that you will be determining and making a final evaluation and vote when you feel comfortable with the site plan. For your information included in the packet, this was a rather thick packet item. The first is the site plan application and checklist that was submitted by the NSPJ architects. They are here tonight, so if
Can I
you,
ask a question real quick?
Yeah.
There was no preliminary plat for this.
that is correct. It's already been
It's
platted
already
and
platted.
platted and zoned appropriately,
land.
so it's,
Okay. I mean, that's been 10 years,
20.
20
Yeah.
years.
Right.
Okay, platted, setbacks, blah, blah, blah. The whole 9 yards that we just reviewed here is all,
Well, yeah. In a multifamily and commercial, remember, we don't necessarily have a preliminary plat process. That platting, the subdivision regulations are where the preliminary plat, final plats come in. Those are really more tailored toward the what we just saw, 26 lots on several acres. But so this, we have two things going. One, it was platted back 20 years ago, so it's already been platted, so there's no need for a preliminary plat. It's already zoned, and it's a multifamily development. So in terms of a commercial development, sometimes the site plan itself, even if this land weren't platted, the site plan would take the place essentially of that preliminary plat. So
okay, so you're going to tell us what's included in here, but it's some of the same discussions we had on the last of drainage.
yeah, there's certainly
et cetera,
parallel
water
to
lines,
the,
Yeah, there are
fire lines
parallels.
will show up.
absolutely.
All right. All right, thank you.
All right, as I was saying, the applicant's represented tonight, and if you have any questions for him after my presentation, certainly you can feel free to call upon them. Staff met with the applicant several times in person, and then also had many phone calls, email exchanges, asking about certain things. I would like to commend them. They did really dig in and learned our codes and our subdivision and our site plan requirements. So I was pleased to deal with them at that level. We completed our technical review on the 15th of November, and I did submit that. I did put that in your report, even though the applicant has addressed the vast majority of those items in the letter their response is in there, but I just wanted you to see the things that we went through when we reviewed the site plan initially when it was first submitted to us. I will kind of hit some of the highlights of some of the things that we that are going on this site. The density is 16.55 units per acre. There's going to be 342 units on 20.66 acres. That's 342 proposed units. 182 units will be single family. 137 units will be 2-bedroom, and there will be 23 villas that are 3-bedroom units. The villas also will have garages with them, and then there will also be garages available in some of the units and carports in the more apartment kind of structures. I guess I'd kind of like to take you through real quick the board here. Villas, right? These are all the villa areas right here, and then buildings 1 through 5 are the apartment complex in the northeast portion of the site. The center of the site, where it says Lot 18, Block 1, is the clubhouse and amenity area. There will be a bocce court, a putting green, a pool, and so there's going to be some really nice amenities within that central area of that building 1, or the block 118 area. Also, there is a dog park in the southeast corner of the site, which is also be a nice feature for future residents. Utility of the location, one of the good things about this site is there's no addition or needed utility extensions or anything required of the city. They're not asking for any tax abatements or water line extensions or anything like that. They're taking care of all those items themselves, and all those items are available on site. The road system, 90th Street, is already in place. It's been built about 10 years ago or so, that is there. One thing that we did ask is on the sidewalks to extend the sidewalk out to Lexington Avenue along 90th Street, so the future residents potentially could access our trail system. Another thing that we'll talk about a little bit later is we've also asked the applicant to take a extension around the exterior of the site, somewhat along the railroad tracks to the northeast corner, which would ultimately tie into the trail system on the east side of the development. One thing also that we noted was there's only 2 trash dumpster locations. There's actually a fairly large one to the north. It's actually a trash compactor. And then there's also a dumpster location within the villa area. We thought that was a little bit light, but the process that they're going to use is basically a trash valet service. They'll have a daily pickup for residents that will pay for it. It's the residents' responsibility to get their trash to the dumpster. They can either pay for it through additional rent charge, or they can take it there themselves. So that's why you don't see a lot of dumpsters on each corner, each area of the building. We did talk about auto parking. The site does exceed the requirements for our our site planning regulations. Stormwater, again, they had to submit a drainage study, which Mike evaluated. The proposed increase will not cause any adjacent private properties owners any undue harm with the construction of the building areas. The detention area is actually going to be, I guess, to the west of the site along the railroad tracks. There's actually, you can see there in the bottom corner of the site, says Tract A detention easement. Majority of the water will drain into that area, but some will head into some of the ditches and head north into Gill Creek. But as Mike explained earlier, the requirement is to not increase the flow off site. It will actually be either add or decreased because of the additional detention areas that are included on the site plan. The architectural elements of the building are part of the overall submittal, and I think that's important that you at least get to see those while they're not specifically laid out in our site plan regulations. The building facades are very contemporary style. They're, once again, there's 5 buildings that are the apartment complexes. The villas are to the southern part of the site, and there is the main entrance feature is pretty significant. They've done some good work as far as making sure there's relief with the types of buildings and structures and heights and columns and some things like that to make sure it's not just one big flat apartment complex. They've done a real good job hiding stairwells and things like that. The one taller building in the middle is actually a stairwell, the reason it goes up to the top is it does provide roof access. They've done a nice job of basically disguising that utilitarian function and actually make it into an architectural feature.
Is there four levels?
Actually, there's 3 levels, 3 apartment levels. You can see the garages are on the bottom, but the top, that bottom part of that rendering on the screen there is just a roof access. In the
So
stairwell.
bottom is parking.
Yes.
Lower level.
Correct.
It is a 4-level structure, though.
Yeah.
Right.
Level structure. Okay. So it's like 50 feet roughly, or
Well, 46 feet is the tallest, is the top of the, hold on, I think that's actually the top of the building. 56 is the top of the, that sort of spire in the middle. And then 46 is the top of the apartment complexes. This does meet our setback requirements. We do have a cap on that, but they've actually exceeded our setbacks, which actually allow them a little bit of height relief in the interior parts of the site. So they've taken advantage of that. Not necessarily, I mean, it's a good thing. Exterior lighting is with downward sconces throughout the site. There will be lighting in the parking lots, but by and large, all the lighting will be contained within sight. We do have a requirement for a illumination plan, which has been submitted, a photometric plan, and has been submitted, which does meet city code. The site plan also includes interior sidewalks throughout, and we have actually, they do have very good connectivity between the buildings, trash compactors, the clubhouse, and all the areas within the site. We felt it was important to have that loop around the site, which we're still having some discussions on, but wanted to bring that to your attention as far as thinking it's important to have accessibility to potentially go around the site if you so choose and connect the trail system within DeSoto. Landscaping plan has been submitted that does meet our planning and buffering requirements. One thing that we wanted to point out was because the townhomes to the south of the site are individually owned, that we wanted to have a stronger buffering area. One of the challenges of that location is because there's some drainage that goes through there. There's a lot of utilities that go through there. There is also a small retaining wall that the applicant has proposed that we would want to at least
point out the townhomes to make sure I understand. Are there those?
Yeah, the ones that
bottom.
Well, those are the villas right there, but the townhomes, Mike. That
Yeah, the townhomes are south of the south property.
yeah, on both sides of Oak Street.
Okay, so they will abut a residential. The backyard of the lowest group of structures across that site, they will abut a residential.
Yeah, but they're zoned R3. They're townhomes, but they are individually owned, which is really, I guess, I don't.
Okay, is there a
I think
structure?
my computer's grinding away. Sorry, yeah.
So I see 1, 2, 3, 4, kind of in the lower left corner. Those are all 4
Well, those are
buildings.
the lots, Richard. There's actually about 3 townhomes per, and they've been all split. The lots have been split, so each person owns their townhome with a common wall between each unit.
And there are 4 buildings in the lower left corner of that site plan that are townhomes. 4 separate.
Well, those 4 buildings where Mike has the cursor are the villas, which are 3-bedroom units with.
What is to the lower right corner?
Same thing, townhomes.
Those are the townhomes.
But it's a
so-
different mean,
It's
talking
the
about-
same
you're talking about-
development. I was trying to pull up just the aerial view, and it almost crashed my computer. So let's
I mean,
try
like,
it again.
The print is pretty small. It would have been nice to have 30.
Yeah.
Building, I can't even read it. Lower right-hand corner, building something. Building 6. Who's got better eyes than I do? Building 5. Okay. 5 looks like 6 to bad eyes. All right. Building 5. That's, how tall is that one?
46 feet, building
All right,
5.
so that's right up on the property line.
Well, it's close, but no, it's not right on the property line, but it does meet our setback requirements for that area.
Okay, so you're good. And the buildings, the townhomes are residential height, 2 levels.
2 levels.
Okay. Okay, so I'm sorry to interrupt you there.
Well,
I guess
that's- and
while
that
we were
was-
talking that.
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of was our sort of concern, is we wanted to have some sort of protection or separation for those individually owned DeSoto residents that own those items and the development or the potential development to the north. But we're kind of in a little bit of limbo because they're zoned the same, and with DeSoto with similar zoning, the buffering requirements are very, very light because of the same zoning and the same use. But we do feel that there needs to be some attention paid to that transition between the individually owned townhomes and the rented apartment units and villas.
Here, privacy fence is gonna be part of the deal.
Well, we talked about a privacy fence, and at this point, what we're sort of recommending, and I might have not removed that quite, or what we'd like to do is have a privacy fence sort of condition as the building gets constructed, and we can actually see a little bit better about how the whole visual impact is going to be. We would make that a condition of approval, whether it's a privacy fence, or maybe we can change that or bring it back to the planning commission and say, well, they'd like to have some, pine trees or something like that instead. But as I had mentioned, plantings are probably not the best way to go in this location. So that's why we'd like to have a privacy fence, but want to at least hold off until we have a little bit better visual look at how the development and how they're going to work or mesh or not mesh with the townhomes.
Okay, so across the southern property line, got 1, 2, 3 buildings. 2 of those buildings are 2 levels. One of them is 4 level. The 4-level building, building 5, that's the one.
Right.
That
Now
appears to
now
be.
the villas aren't as tall. They're
Yeah.
they're not 46 feet. Just that one building that you'd mentioned.
Building 5 is 40-some feet tall, and there's no road there. There's like whatever that setback is, 45 feet, 40 feet,
Correct.
50 feet. I'm just trying to get a feel for what kind of shadow that thing's going to cast.
Mm-hmm.
You got any thoughts on that? Or?
Well, the only thing about the shadow, I mean, as you know, the sun will be coming up and swinging around this way. So most of the time the shadow will be on the north side of the building and not casting much of a shadow. There will be early morning.
Yeah, or let me rephrase that. The visual shadow. You know what I mean?
Oh, okay.
You're in the backyard of, there's a cul-de-sac and 1, 2, 3, 4 lots there that kind of,
Right. Well, you're right. There's going to be
a visual shadow.
for the people on the top, there'll be they'll certainly have a very
But
clear view of the backyards of the towns.
My question to you is that's all fair and well because it's less than the height restriction.
Correct.
And it's not we don't have vertical setback in our building code, in our design manual. So we're all good with that, but it kind of crowds this backyard. Just visually, it appears it does.
If you look at the screen, part of the application was this cross section
Yeah.
here on the screen that shows building 5 and then shows where the property line is and shows the existing. So the existing townhomes are to the right, and building 5 is there on the left. The grading plan has a retaining wall, 4 foot tall retaining wall there or so, and building 5 is 3 levels. So this kind of shows that visual impact, maybe a little better, kind of what you're after, right?
Yes. So the structure with a slope roof is the 2-level existing building.
Right.
Correct.
Okay, yeah, you're right. It's not. No, not that bad. I'm glad you pointed that out, Mike. I was just concerned about, overpowering, the visual overpowering
Right, yeah, and
the visual shadow.
yeah, and that's why we do have this recommendation for a privacy fence that as the buildings are moving a little bit farther along and we can better assess that impact. This certainly does help, but it's good to see something a little bit more concrete in the field when the
So
time
that's
is.
just something you'd implement at the time, Brad?
Yeah, that's what we're recommending.
Okay, yeah. Sorry for the side trip here.
No, that's fine, Rich. Anyway, it sort of brings us to the our conclusion and our recommendations. In general, it's found that the site plan does meet our requirements in our zoning regulations and is consistent with the intent of City of DeSoto site plan requirements. The recommendations that we have are also the parkland, and it's actually on the site plan, is across the railroad tracks. Actually, the owner does, or the applicant does own that property. We'd like to have that dedicated to the City of DeSoto as parkland. We actually are looking at developing a small sort of regional park west of Commerce Drive, a little bit south of Lexington, and then, of course, on the other side of the railroad tracks in that area. We just finished up our working
Can
on
you show me where you're
Yeah, it's
going?
this here. It's labeled as
It does
dedicated
say
parking.
dedicated.
You guys are going to have to get bigger plans. I'm sorry.
Well, we could, I guess for convenience, Richard, we do have, if you'd like, I do have a full-size set.
If you want us to review them, or me to review it, you're going to have to get me a bigger plan next time. All right, got it.
And anyway, that was one of our recommendations. Two was a privacy fence is added to the southern boundary of the project as a condition of approval to be determined by city staff before an occupancy permit is given to the villas in Building 5. Also, we had an entrance feature on 90th Street in the area between the railroad tracks and Building Number 2. When they initially submitted, they had a water feature and some other items in there. And we talked to them about we really wanted to have some sort of feature there. It didn't necessarily have to be a pond or a fountain or anything like that, but we would like to see some sort of aesthetic treatment. And I think they were agreeable to doing something there, but they just didn't want to be tied down to exactly, precisely what would be shown on the site plan. So that's something that we'll monitor and watch as as building permits are submitted throughout the process. And then finally, as I mentioned, the sidewalk system is added connecting the west to the east that loops around the site to the north. And I think those are our recommendations, but otherwise it does meet our site plan requirements for the R3 multifamily district.
That's all you have to say.
That concludes my presentation. Certainly the applicant's here tonight if you'd like to ask them.
Well,
I
I would like, before I invite anybody else up to speak, does anybody have any questions? We can come back to Brad towards the end of this, but at this point in time, a couple quick questions.
Sure,
maybe
Richard.
To you. I'm going to ask that. So how does the trash get from the third level apartment to the compactor?
Well,
Put it in a bag and carry it and walk it.
that if they choose to do that, or they can hire the service within the apartment complex too. They'll just put the bag outside their front door, or actually they're gonna have a dedicated dumpster, a small one. It's probably no bigger than a small trash can that's picked up daily, and the complex will pick it up. So either A, they hire the complex to pick up their trash and get it to the dumpster, or they have to.
So they're going to do their own maintenance, except for the road maintenance?
That's correct. All the only parts of the road we will, as we are doing now, 90th Street and Oak Street are city maintain roads, but everything else, the parking, all the utilities in site will be owned and maintained by the apartment complex.
There is on the utility side, there will be sanitary sewer through the site that still will be public, some of which will need to be rerouted, potentially relocated through the process. So that's really the only only other public utility.
We doing that, or they doing that?
No, they'd be doing that. Yeah. They indicated, of course, all these buildings will have water service to them, and they indicated that the water mains internal to the property will be private. So they'll be constructing, maintaining. We'll have a meter, there at the property line, basically, with the road right of way. So we'll have one big meter, and we won't have separate meters throughout the complex. That's as it's envisioned now.
And these will all have sprinkler systems in the apartments and everything?
Yeah, the buildings are large enough to require sprinklering, yes.
With the height of these buildings, has any thought been given to fire equipment?
Yeah, so we have run this, past the fire person, our building inspector essentially is that person. There's some dialogue about that, but nothing specific.
Here, 'cause we don't have a ladder truck or anything that would aerial. That would go
No, well, maybe Bob's best to answer that question for us.
We may have to purchase one now.
Brett, how many
But
units
we're
are
covered.
ADA compliant?
Well, I guess I don't know specifically, but the units on the bottom floors are ADA compliant. They do have 13 handicap spots spread around the complex, and each building does have some ADA units, but I can't answer exactly which ones are ADA compliant, but that is part of the overall development.
Is this going to be the first elevator in DeSoto?
Well, we got one here in City Hall.
Oh, excuse me. You're right. You do. You have one right here. Okay. This be the second elevator. All right. Let's see. Parking, lighting, spillage. I noticed all the parking is pretty much into the internal.
Correct.
So that doesn't appear visually to me, from what I'm trying to read at this scale. I don't see any potential problems, and staff didn't see any.
No, they did submit a photometric plan, which we evaluated, and it does meet our requirements. And like you said, Richard, the parking lot structures are all going to be interior and blocked by the buildings themselves, and then the buildings will just have downlighting on them.
My other question is this rendering. Where is the viewer standing on the site plan to look at that?
They're approximately at the main entrance to the site, kind of.
Probably about right here.
Yeah, right in that area, right where that drop off area is, that circle drop off that's in the middle of the site.
Somewhere in this area.
Yeah.
Okay, so this is. Oh, I see. It's a low. To me, this looks like the main clubhouse or something, and you're not.
Yeah, it is. That is the main clubhouse entrance from the.
Can you go to the site plan for a second? Okay, that is that big rectangular or big U-shaped building in the middle.
Now there are apartments within there, but the center section is the clubhouse, and the rental offices and those types of uses are in that area there.
Yeah, we don't require, or nor did we receive any footprint layout internal.
Yeah.
I'm sure they have them, but it's just not part of our requirements.
Sure,
So
sure.
we're a little bit assuming things, the applicants here.
Well, the main reason I was asking is this is not just a generic thing from another project. This is for this project. This was my question.
Well, I guess I couldn't answer that. It does seem to fit the site very well, and they've done their homework as far as understanding our code and how to maximize the location as best possible. I'm sure they have standard units and things like that, but I guess I'll defer to the applicant for that.
Okay, so let me see if I got any other notes on here. And the bottom, the actual distance from the property line to the bottom 3 buildings is, from that section you showed me, it looked like it was 45 feet or so.
I guess I'm not quite understanding your question, Richard.
What is the setback on the bottom?
It's about 30 feet is what
About
we
30
have.
feet, okay.
Yeah.
And yeah, that's all I have at this point in time. Anybody else have any questions for staff?
Yeah, I'd like to ask, since the applicant submitted a detailed traffic study,
Yes, yes.
but that was in 2001. They're going off of that.
Well, right. I'd like to address. Yeah, go ahead with your question. Sorry.
We've picked up a lot of traffic since 2001.
Right.
How are you going to deal with that?
So, so it's a good question. I didn't know if I wanted to go into it or not, but since it came up, yeah. So the site did receive approval for an apartment complex back in 2001. I think that one had 250 units or so, somewhere thereabouts, with a detailed traffic study. The new study essentially is a brand new study, but kind of I referenced the old study because some of the improvements that were recommended by that original study were installed at that time, and most notably that center turn lane on Lexington Avenue between 90th Street and 90th Circle, that was put in for these apartments, and obviously not needed. So the new study they did new counts, so they got current traffic volumes, and they estimated traffic volumes from this entire development plus all the stuff that's already there now and anything into the future. They also projected 20 years into the future, future traffic volumes that is kind of a crystal ball, but the study sort of addressed all of that. And what these traffic impact studies are really meant to do, most of the issues associated with traffic congestion occur at intersections. So the study looked at the intersection of 90th Street and Lexington Avenue primarily. Again, 90th Street, there's that divided median situation that is there now with right and left turn lanes. That was installed mostly for the apartment complex as well. Found that the level of service, today, after the apartments are built and potentially 20 years into the future, don't warrant any additional geometric improvements at that location. It looked at the other intersections of 90th and Oak, and then also at Oak and 90th Circle, the one to the south. I can't remember the name. I think it's 90th Circle. Found that those level of service for those intersections was fine throughout the 20-year period. The only possible caveat to all that is that when you look at this intersection of 90th Street and Lexington Avenue, 20 years into the future, it may warrant a traffic signal there, but so much could happen between now and then. Don't think it's really within our purview to require. Definitely, you don't want to install a traffic signal now before it's warranted, or on the conjecture that it might be warranted someday. So that's the conclusion of that traffic. I didn't want you to think that we're going off some traffic study from 17 years ago. It's certainly
Well, it kind of reads that way.
okay. Well, sorry I wasn't as clear as I should have been, but yeah, it's a new analysis was done.
No more questions at this point in time for staff. So, is there anybody in the audience who would like to come up and speak about this project? Please come to the podium, say your name and address, and we're here to listen.
My name's Katie Lee, and I live on 90th Circle. So our lot is 15, which will back up directly to a parking lot. I have a few different concerns. One, on the traffic light, we have a school there. We have 2 schools. We have 3 schools right there. You're talking about putting 342 units. Say each unit has 2 drivers. That's a lot of cars in the morning going to work with schools there and no light. There really needs to be a light now. I mean, if you've ever been over there in the morning or after school, there needs to be a light. So I totally disagree with that 2001. I don't see how that is even possible. Two dumpsters.
Can I stop for, which intersection are you?
Well, either one of them. When 90th Circle comes directly out, but I think what he was referring to was 90th Street with the two median, that one right
90th
there.
Street is the primary, right.
You have Lexington Trail right there. You have DeSoto and you have Starside all right there in the mornings and after school. The mornings, I would say, is probably the worst because people are going to work at the same time they're going to school or they're dropping their kids off or whatever. So I would think that needs to be reevaluated. 2 dumpsters for 342 units. It's a lot of trash for 342 units provides a lot of trash, more dumpsters, I would say. Otherwise, it's going to flow into our backyard is what I'm worried about.
I mean, they're compactors, or,
Right.
different.
I know the difference.
Okay.
I've been an apartment manager before,
Oh,
so I have a
all
little
right.
bit of experience with
Good.
that. Parking, the parking is already an issue in our, with our townhomes. Our homeowners association won't let us park on the street. A lot of the townhomes have 4 cars in them, so I worry about the parking overflowing from that many apartment complexes onto the streets as well and onto our street. That's a concern. And then just the big building. Obviously, I mean, when we bought there, we didn't anticipate there being a huge building in our backyard that close. Our backyards aren't very big anyway. And to have it, even though it looks like it may have a little bit of room, when you're back there, it's not that much room. And that's concerning.
Did you, I forgot, what did you say your name was?
Katie.
Katie, did you understand that one section that was?
I did, but I think in reality, it's not going to be that much. You're going to have a building in our backyard, and it is going to, I mean, we're going to have an apartment complex building in our backyard, looking out our window,
Okay.
and people looking in. So,
Right.
I mean, I think there's going to be a lot of concern from a lot of different residents, but I would say my biggest concern of all of it is going to be the traffic.
So to correct your concerns, just opinion here.
Sure.
A stoplight, a controlled traffic controlling device.
Something.
Yeah, there's a lot of thought that goes into this. People hate them and love them, and you know.
I just think safety-wise,
Yeah.
I mean, you're talking, if there's 342 units, that's 684 cars every morning. Say it's 2 people car, you know, husband and wife, not to mention any kids that may live in the village that are also leaving 2 streets. There's only 2 streets to get out to Lexington.
As long as everybody turned right, it'd be okay.
Right.
So,
So those are just my initial concerns right off the bat.
okay.
And
no,
who really wants a huge building in their backyard?
I know that. I mean, that's like we run it. I mean, that's common topic here.
Sure.
Hey, not in my backyard, and
I do like the idea of the privacy fence being put up as a benefit for us, because really, the homeowners that are already there, there is no benefit to this at all, unless maybe we get to use the pool, you know, or something like that. But that's
Yeah.
really,
Yeah.
there's really no benefit. So I think that would be a nice gesture.
okay. Anybody have any questions for Katie or comments? Thank you.
Uh-huh.
Yes, ma'am. Please state your name and address. And
I will. I'm Cindy Johansson, and I'm at 8910 Lexington Avenue, right across the street from 90th Street, from the 90th Street exit. And in fact, we just sold our townhome to Katie. And thankfully for us, we did it at that time, because this type of complex there is going to substantially affect the property values of the townhomes that are there right now. When the apartment complex was put in over here across from Custom Foods, when people found out about it, they sold those properties that butt up against the back, and that's the street. It's the brand new apartment complex that they're building, K10 Place. Well, the people, and there were only 2 or 3 homes that were right behind that. Well, those property values have dropped substantially since that apartment complex went up in there. And they're putting in a full privacy fence. They have an easement between, I mean, their homes, their lot sizes are huge. The lot sizes, I think probably the backyards in these townhomes are 10 feet. So you're talking about having a home 10 feet for your backyard, and then a few feet from that, a massive 3-story apartment building. So it's going to significantly affect the ability for those people in those townhomes to be able to sell. And I'm all for development. I own a small business here in DeSoto. We make income from the development that goes on in DeSoto, so I am all for development. But I do have a huge issue as well with Katie with the traffic. There are teenage kids driving that road in the morning. That road, we live right on Lexington Avenue now, and I can tell you, we sit out on our front patio and watch people driving down Lexington Avenue at 50, 60 miles an hour. You're putting in an apartment complex that may end up having 600 more cars traveling that road, and already the traffic on that road is unbelievable. And you know, you have to account for the fact that parents come and pick up their kids at Starside. They come down Lexington, they turn onto whatever that street is in front of Casey's. 91st Street. They turn onto 91st Street. All those kids that get out of high school try to make a left out of 91st Street onto Lexington. I can tell you, I have seen thousands of near misses because of those kids coming out there. And now you're putting that much more traffic on that road. It seems to me that it would almost be a wiser move to make the entrance and the exit go out towards the Hutamaki area, so you don't having it going right onto a main road. It makes absolutely no sense at all. So, property values, height, you know, we are a small community, and it's a beautiful complex. It's a gorgeous complex. I would love to live there. It's a gorgeous complex. But I just think for the community and for that space right there, it's awfully big. So those are my concerns.
When we wish for more rooftops in DeSoto, we have to be careful what we wish for.
Yeah, and I'm all for more rooftops. I'm a huge advocate of development. I've got 26 acres over on 95th. You could buy it from me and develop it. I'd develop away, but it's outside of the main portion of the city. And what concerns me is there are so many kids. Kids walk across that street constantly right there in front of Dollar General, coming out of school. So all that traffic spilling out onto Lexington Avenue is, I think, should be a serious concern. So,
well, I'm going to tie this back to staff for a second at this point in time. Who read the traffic report?
Yeah, I did.
Mike,
Yeah.
You got anything to say?
Yeah, well, I mean, all of these are really good points, and all of these concerns are something that we've been concerned with as a city. The pedestrian accessibility issues here are as important to us as the vehiculars. We've known, the intersection of 90th and Lexington Avenue. We're just finishing up a pretty detailed traffic analysis that KDOT actually paid for. Looking at that intersection, we've had I've been here 18 years, and we've studied that intersection. This is the fourth time.
That's 91st in Lexington.
91st. What did I say?
90th.
I'm sorry. I'm talking about 91st, the one in front of
Yeah,
Casey's.
Casey's.
Sorry. This will be the fourth time that we've looked at that. So each time we look at it, we try to determine whether or not we should put a traffic signal there. The thing about a traffic signal is if you put one in before it's warranted, then you do more harm than good. You cause accidents that might not otherwise occur. And our problem with this one has been that we need it for about 25 minutes, about 185 days a year when the school traffic is occurring. All the other times around the clock and around the year, it's not warranted because the traffic volumes on Lexington Avenue are so low. And indeed, that was what we just found this year. Again, the traffic volumes don't warrant a signal there 100% of the time. That study does have some other recommendations about traffic calming treatments. A roundabout is suggested. Not saying we're going there, but it's expensive. But so that intersection's been on our radar screen for quite a while. More recently, the pedestrian access issue has come up. How to get pedestrians from one side to the other. We're taking a look at that. We've done some things. We need to do more there. That whole corridor, and the reason that I think this is the best spot for a high intense residential use is because of its proximity to the schools. Exactly because of, if we have school children in proximity to the schools and they have to travel less distance, but that corridor does need some improvements. So one of the things we are doing is next year we will be extending 91st Street to the west. So it currently ends here in just past the elementary school. We're going to be extending that out to Sunflower Road. We're in hopes that will alleviate some of the problem here at the intersection of 91st and Lexington, because now there will be an opportunity for people to go another direction rather than hit that. I think it'll do some good. It probably won't solve the whole problem. We're also looking at a pedestrian path in connection with that project. We'll be extending a pedestrian path all the way along the south side of 91st Street and taking it south down Lexington and crossing Lexington at the signal here. So kids wanting to come from the high school can get to McDonald's without having to cross here at 91st Street. Those are some of the things we're looking at. I do, this definitely, I think your guesstimate about 600 people is probably about right. The traffic study, they did project overall traffic volumes in and out throughout the whole day of just under 2,000 vehicles. So peak hour, that's going to make a difference. It will. But just a signal at this particular intersection, again, it's the scenario where it might do more harm than good if you put it in before it's warranted.
Well, and I'm not even recommending a signal. I'm recommending that you had the access point out the other side, right, as opposed to being out to Lexington Avenue. Have it go out to, because then they can come around in front of Rarig and in front of Rarig, around by the grocery store to a traffic light to get onto the freeway. Whereas there, you're clogging up, and that in the morning has the flashing signal all along the road. You can't go over 35 miles an hour because it's school, and that's from 7 a.m., 6:30 a.m. to 7:30 a.m.
20 miles an hour.
20 miles an hour. I'm
Yeah, the
sorry.
school zone,
Yeah, school zones. So what you're doing is you're even further impeding traffic on that road because it is a school zone. You've got 20-mile-an-hour traffic, and then after school, from 2:30, 3 o'clock to 4 o'clock, it's also a 20-mile-an-hour zone. So, and I don't know, most of us go to work around that same time, and most of us come home from work around that same time. So you've got a massive pileup of people there. And the kids coming out from 91st and trying to turn left. In fact, this is what they do. They come out and turn right onto Lexington Avenue, hit the stop sign, turn into McDonald's, flip a U-ey, and then go get back on Lexington the other way so they don't have to sit there. Because you can sit there at 91st for 15, 20 minutes waiting to turn left. Every day at 4 o'clock, 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock. So I'm just saying, the access to that big a complex really needs to be evaluated. The access point to that type of complex really needs to be evaluated.
Well, can I ask, I'm going to tie this to Mike. Was that study paid for by the developer or paid for by?
It was developer.
And
Well, there's two studies. Mike, which study he's talking about?
Oh.
Because the 91st study was not part of the development. That was a
Right.
huge study independently done.
This was the
that's the
study
city.
at the intersection of 91st and Lexington. That was a city study. We requested funding from KDOT. They approved it. They paid for it, so it is our study. We haven't completely finalized that yet, but that was a city study, and that was before and independent of the apartment complex. As soon as we found out the apartments were coming in, we let them know, about the traffic projections there. But the study that we reference in the staff report was paid for by the developer alone. Yeah.
So if this developer were requested to put in, or requested a stoplight at that intersection right there, yes, who would pay for that? I'm just throwing that what if out there.
I guess it brings in, there's a couple of things at play there. I mean, just because you want one doesn't mean it's advisable to put one there.
Okay.
If they wanted one and it's advisable and engineering practice and standards said it was okay, then they could pay for it. That would be fine. We wouldn't want one before it's actually needed. I think if anything, it's the pedestrian access that we're looking at. I think we're going to, and we've started this discussion with the council, independent of this apartment complex. But there is an issue with pedestrians crossing Lexington Avenue because we have some mid-block crossings that aren't the best. So we've committed to taking a more comprehensive look at that, getting some overhead signals and pedestrian actuated signals that'll be just more clear and easier for pedestrians. Again, I think I've described kind of what the angles we're taking and the paths we're following to address what we know is an issue. We do. I mean, it's.
Well, and that's why I say, and that's why I'm here addressing the Planning Commission, because this is city planning. You're the people that plan the direction of this city. And by convoluting areas like this, instead of having a variety of access points, will create major problems for us down the road. So, while we may not need a traffic light until 2020, we don't know what other development is going to go up along the whole Lexington Avenue corridor. I mean, you're looking at south of K10, and we don't know what's going to be coming north. So there's a lot of areas that will feed into that small Lexington Avenue road. And so I'm just saying, from a planning perspective, I would certainly be looking at other access points, because even if you had a fire in that complex, how are all those people gonna get out one exit like that? So
good point. What would make you feel better about this going in then? Traffic.
Well, I think you need another access point to the complex. I think you need another access point. Secondarily, I think the developer needs to really sit down with the neighbors who are in those townhomes on 90th Circle, and have a discussion about what they feel like would be good for that particular development, and think about it from their own perspective. If you were a property owner of one of those townhomes, what would you want to see 10 feet behind you? So those are the two things that I think are the most important things. Thanks.
Is there anybody else in the audience who would like to get up and speak about the project in front of us? Is there, well, is the applicant here? Would, sir, would you mind just maybe addressing some of the things that have come up tonight?
Sure, thank you. My name is Clint Evans, 4731 Mercier Street, Kansas City, Missouri. Thank you for having us here tonight. Basically, the scale of the villa properties and then Building 5 was very purposely done, along with the grading to lower the scale of those buildings, so that way they did relate to the townhomes behind. And that's the villas that you see there in elevation. Above, again, they have a very residential scale, low-pitched roofs, et cetera. And then, of course, in working with the planning staff on the Building 5 placement within the setbacks, that were allotted based on the existing zoning, et cetera, we went to extra measures to lower the building and nestle it into the ground, so that way then it was not appearing to loom.
Okay.
So,
well, just roughly, I don't know how accurate that is, but the gutter line on the existing building, the residential with the sloped roof, is your parapet like 10 feet, 8 feet, 10 feet above that? Or?
I would say more like 8 feet.
About 8 feet, okay. And the total distance between those two structures is approximately, I know your setback is, well.
This shows about 50 feet.
About 50
49 feet.
Yeah. Okay.
It's 49 feet from the townhouses to the back of that building.
Yeah, that's what this shows. You don't know if that's the case at every single location, but in general, that's.
Well, it's important to look too at the dash line to show what could have been built under the zoning as far as not only setback but height. So that begins to point out the fact that the buildings have been placed sensitively.
I mean, it looks reasonable to me, can you tell us about the trash in and out of your place?
Sure. And those are details that are still being worked through right now as far as from the leasing perspective, the leasing management company. But to go into a little more detail about the trash valet service, it's actually not optional. It is a mandatory add-on to the rent cost. Everyone in the complex receives a black bin with a lid that is attached that their trash has to fit within that. And then the lid has to be completely closed, so that way visually to the other tenants, it's very non-obtrusive. It's lined, prevent leaking. All of these buildings are internal corridors, so that's nothing that would ever be seen by any neighbors. When in developing a Class A property such as this, it's really more of like a lifestyle environment. And so as such, the landlord has every bit of the want to make this look as spectacular as possible, because their leasing based on the rent roll depends upon it. And that's the lush landscaping, that's the amenity packages, that's the beautiful exteriors that are highly fenestrated, not just slab-sided apartment buildings. So it's a actual, kind of lifestyle. And we have geared the unit makeup more heavily towards family orientation by providing a higher number of 2 bedrooms, 2-bedroom plus dens in the apartment units themselves. And then, of course, the villas are 3 bedrooms with a 2-car private garage per each unit. So again, we see our surroundings as far as the schools, et cetera, as a major benefit. And so that's why the planning staff has not heard anything but from us, except we want to connect to the trail systems. We want to actually, part of the stipulations of the planning staff discussions that we've had back and forth is they'd actually wanted to see the trail run alongside the existing train tracks. We look at it whenever we develop one of these communities. We actually look at connecting to trails and trailheads as a major benefit because it's an energizer. It creates traffic on the streets of the complex, foot traffic, etc. Anything that we can do to connect into that and get the community to interact through the neighborhood of this new development is something that we see as highly beneficial. So we would prefer to bring the foot traffic actually through designated areas, different colored paving, et cetera, through the complex versus putting it out to the side of the train tracks where we kind of see it as visually not great and potentially a safety hazard, but it's a very low traffic rail. We know that. And so, but that's kind of our reasoning for why we want to embrace rather than push the pedestrians outside of the complex.
I know that it's to your benefit to have, let me phrase it this way, nobody's ever complained that there's too much parking. Okay, so if you take that statement and apply it to your facility, are people going to complain that there's too much parking?
No, I would say quite the opposite. There's probably a good chance that the people who would like to park on the street now will probably end up parking in the new apartment parking lot. We have the tuck unders. Just a hunch, but we do have a lot of parking that's not visible, that's beneath the buildings. We have freestanding parking garages, carports, aesthetic means of screening the parking areas, not just for the residents, but the community at large as well. So that's, again, parking is a necessity for Class A, and parking counts vary anywhere on average from 1.5 to 1.75 cars per unit preferred for typical developments. However, we as architects and then our landscape architects that we have in our offices, we would rather not look at a parking lot. And so that's why we do our best in the architecture to screen it, hide it, landscape it, make it look aesthetically appealing.
What is a Class A? You've said that a couple times.
It's the category of rent. It's the level of tiers of renter that you're looking for. There's Class A, B, and C levels, and Class A is generally considered top of the line. The finishes in the units are as nice, if not nicer, than most people's homes. Granite or quartz countertops, solid wood cabinetry, the crown moldings, the nice lighting, upgraded finishes in bathrooms and things like that. So in order to do something like this complex, the exterior fenestration, again, getting away from slab-sided apartments to something that's highly fenestrated, lots of in and outs, it's all expensive to do. And to create that high-quality look, the density comes into play, and then that generates, of course, the higher rent roll as well.
Okay, I've not heard that used. That class,
sure.
High end or top of the line, but class.
Sure.
So you don't personally foresee parking issue?
No.
And it would be to your benefit. Now, your you're not the owner. You are.
I'm the architect.
You are the architect.
Yes.
Okay. Is the owner person? I mean, person who's going to make the money from this, whoever, a corporation or whatever, they obviously have to be concerned about parking because that'll certainly make or break, a facility.
Absolutely.
And they're on board with your numbers. You feel good with your numbers. You meet our city regs. Okay. Any other questions for can you explain this? Is this rendering job specific?
Absolutely. Yes. Every complex that we do is site specific to the area. There are other architecture firms out there that are more than happy to stamp a set of plans for the same buildings. We, however, are not. That's not why we're hired. We specialize in creating lifestyle environments, and this is a unique lifestyle environment for DeSoto.
Okay. No, it looks good. Tell me about the exterior materials.
Sure.
What are the neighbors going to see across their backyard?
They're going to see the same basic materials as what you're seeing there now, except around the club, obviously, it's a little more highly fenestrated with the stone and the even higher quality materials. But we're using a mix of hardy reveal, hardy siding stucco, stone accents, and then aluminum railing, pre-finished metal. All materials are designed to be maintenance free.
Those darker, kind of a bluish and a reddish on the left elevation there. Are those stone, or where is the stone? Where's the stucco? Where's the hardy board? Where's
the stone is always placed near the base of the buildings because that's what is in fact going to take the most abuse, and so that's why we impart those type of materials around the base of the buildings. Plus, it also seats the buildings architecturally, kind of gives it the base metal cap type architectural vernacular.
Rustic base.
Yes, and then but then like the panels that are like the blue and that brown color that kind of tends to look red, that is hardy reveal.
Aluminum railings, you said. Pre-finished.
No rust.
They don't rust. Okay, I like
Correct.
Does anybody have any other questions for the architect? Well, tell us about, you're not the person to ask this, I think, but I'm going to ask it anyway. Your thoughts on traffic in and out of your Class A facility, on to Lexington, and you've obviously driven Lexington, and you understand, the challenges.
Understood. With any development we do, the concerns are always two things: stormwater and how is that affecting me, and traffic. So they're all excellent questions and excellent concerns. Again, whenever we have historically looked at these larger complexes, there are peak hours, let's say, but yet then the studies that we have done, and actually we've had third-party studies on other developments. We work a lot with like North Point Development. I don't know if you've heard of them, EPC. Yes. Basically they've conducted their own studies, and then they've hired hired these independent companies to study in fact, what are peak hours for a person living in a community like this? And actually what they find is that with the mix of the people who live in these communities, there isn't necessarily a peak, as some people are leaving, some people are coming home. There's a larger variety than just not a mass exodus at 8 a.m. and then everyone returns home at 5. There's a wide variety throughout the day and night of the traffic.
So in Class A, you're going to have older people. I mean,
Older, the type of target market that that gravitate towards these complexes are it's unique. It's actually the same audience, but there's either the lock and leaves, the individuals who want to sell their home nearby, use the equity from the home and travel and have fun the rest of their lives, not leave it to the kids. But it's either that or the millennial generation. And there's been a lot of extensive study done as far as like 55 plus and, active senior communities and things like that. And actually, seniors want to commingle with the millennials because it's the activity, it's the life of the community. And the millennials in turn are quite happy with that as well. Because people who are paying these type of rents, they're not going to be the type to have the trash can parties on the decks and stuff like that. They're paying a lot of money. They want a nice community. They want a nice experience. And there's going to be a management company that's overseeing this like a hawk. So.
Okay.
I just have one quick question. Ms. Johansson made a comment about, would your group be willing to sit down and talk with the townhome owners? Good neighbors, good friends.
I would have to discuss that with the ownership to see, what their thoughts are on that. So that would probably be better suited for the owner.
Just curious.
Mm-hmm.
That kind of was our idea about, the condition on the site plan. So we thought a fence would be appropriate. They have their counterpoints about the building being lower and further back and the shorter building. And really, as the thing goes up, we'll have a much better understanding. When a person's sitting there looking at 50 feet to their property line, but right now it's an open field forever. As a building gets constructed, as these things take shape, we'll have a much better feel for what's needed to address any negative impacts all along the whole south line. So that's why we thought it was appropriate to kind of leave that as a further discussion, involve city staff so the neighbors could have some avenue to voice concerns, and then we have some control, because it's a condition of the site plan, some control to work that situation out. We can be that liaison between the owner, the builder. I mean, really, it's going to be construction manager type person that might go out and make contact with neighbors. We don't really know. But we'd be happy to be that conduit to work the buffer thing out for sure.
And the ownership is completely on board with that too.
Well, they'd have to be if it's a condition of the site plan.
Yeah, I mean, we're
so, yeah,
we're very supportive.
They certainly
of that.
have, and their response letter was included in your packet. They voiced that that support for that sort of a concept as well. So hopefully that does can go a little ways to alleviating some concerns there. Not to say it's going to be it's going to be a big building. It's going to be close. But
what would the expectations of a discussion be? A very good explanation that the residents see all these problems and the providers have a good answer for them, and hopefully they can connect and form a bond. I mean, that's the expectations.
No promises.
Right.
But yeah, that's the hope. And if we come to an impasse, we could bring it back to the planning commission. I think for some final determination between parties.
Because I've not seen this in my years at planning commission that we put a requirement coordinate with neighbors or whatever.
Well, it's not necessarily that. I mean, it's basically it's staff. The requirement isn't on the applicant to make the neighbors happy. The requirement is for the applicant to work with staff, and it's our job to serve as that intermediary between the two, if it need be.
So staff is fine with that kind of stipulation.
I think that's what we're here for, really. I mean, I think that's what zoning regulations are meant to do, is to put someone between property rights of a neighbor and between neighbors. That's
Well, I mean, you
kinda what we-
understand, you know, from a developer standpoint, they've got regs, height, length, width, number of parking spots. They meet all that.
Right. Well, and you know, for that standpoint, you know, if we're just looking, because now we've got something that's platted, we've got something that's zoned.
Yeah.
They have a right to develop on the property in accordance with our regulations. And the site plan you have in front of you without the fence is in accordance with our regulations. It meets them. They have a right.
Well, it exceeds, actually.
It exceeds, right? Okay. So you know, the further discussion is a bit above and beyond. So that's my comfort level with it. But I knew, you know, we understand that people live there and they've been there for years, some of them, and this is a big change. And I think it's appropriate that your local government can be a part of serving as a bridge between what's there, what's not there now, and what will be there in the future. I think it's an appropriate thing for us to do.
Okay, no, I think it's a good thing. It's just kind of a new one on me.
It is.
That staff is willing to, or you know, but you're right. You meet the letter of the law. The only gray area that I personally see, and I'll go first. I want to ask everybody else gray areas, or well, let's hold off on this. I would like everybody else to speak who would like to tonight before I make my next, before we go through the line again. Any further questions for the architect at this point in time? Okay, thank you, Clint.
Okay, thank you very much.
Is there anybody else in the audience who'd like to get up and talk about this project in front of us? Well, hearing none, I'll go back to my first statement again. Be careful what you ask for. We're rooftops, you know. Here they are. They're staring us in the face. It's bigger, better, faster than I visualized we would get in DeSoto, you know. But it does. For staff, it meets the regs. The only gray area I see is the parking and the traffic. Now, how much of a problem that is, you know, I don't know, you know. Is it true that they wait? I think the comment was 12 to 15 minutes waiting to turn, getting out of school. I mean, I don't know. That's 3 lifetimes.
I've been out there.
Is it?
It's quite a wait sometimes, and there's times when you can't get into Casey's. If you go up there, you're just gonna wait for a while. When school's getting out, if you try to go into Casey's or the Mexican restaurant or anything up there, you're gonna wait a little while.
If it's that bad, we need something else. If it's, I mean, like I say, it's a gray area, you know. And can I ask staff back on that gray area? Staff is fairly comfortable that current street control, whether it be speed limit or pedestrian crossings or whatever, is respectfully controlled?
Well, yeah, I think a lot of the groundwork was laid in 2001. The turn lane was improved, put in. The study concludes that, you know, these intersections will function at a level of service that's appropriate for the community. The issue with 91st and Lexington is there now.
Yeah.
This won't make it better. We understand this won't make it better. But if this happens here, or if it happens 2 miles away, or up or down, 600 more people in the town is not going to make it better, regardless of where it is. This is a very appropriate. Lexington Avenue is the main arterial corridor. If you don't count K10, it's the main arterial corridor through the town. Where else do you want? You want an intense development like this to connect directly to your main arterial corridor in town. I think it's an appropriate location for that. And again, you know, I won't rehash the pedestrian element, but we are sensitive to that. We do know there's a problem there, and it's a bad problem. I don't think 15 minutes is an exaggeration. I mean, if it is, it's only a little one. but it is only 15 or 20 minutes a day, and only when school is in session. So that's the conundrum. We know we'd like to do something. 91st Street extension may help. We're going to keep studying it. We've committed to figuring out the pedestrian access side of that. We know it's painful. We don't like it any more than anybody else. But I don't know that you can take this development and make it the demon for the whole problem. We know that's not the case.
Okay, so can I paraphrase your thoughts? This development is not going to make or break the traffic on Lexington, and the access point is adequate in staff's opinion.
Appropriate, right.
Okay. Anybody else have any questions for? So if a motion were to be made, it would need the verbiage of the owner to coordinate with staff to address. I'm not saying, I'm using the word address. That needs to be defined, probably to address potential issues with the neighborhood.
What they're going to do anyway.
Huh?
They already do that.
He's already going to do it. Yeah. Well, it ought to be part. I think it ought to be part of the
so if the
Also
staff report
states correct.
has a conclusion there at the bottom, at the page 2, just of the staff report.
Page 2.
Under conclusions. Recommends approval with the following. There's 4 conditions
excuse me.
there.
Yeah, they're doing what they're supposed to do.
Talk about the parkland. The conclusion, item number 2 says a privacy fence. I don't know if we want to be that specific, but I think maybe a better phrasing there could be wordsmith, something about that the buffer along the southern border be approved by city staff before occupancy permits given, rather than the fence in particular. And then item 3, the entrance to the feature on 90th Street. And then item 4, we didn't really address it. I think the applicant, the architect did. Certainly, we might want to talk a little bit more about that, whether or not you want to include that. Staff's idea was for the sidewalk to kind of go along the west edge and north edge of the complex basically to connect Lexington Avenue and 90th Street with the northeast corner of the property. The applicant's preference is to route that, as they've done, through the site, essentially, with interior sidewalks.
Wow, that seems forbidding to me, to walk through the apartment complex.
Not everybody may want to make that walk through the
Well,
apartment complex to get from point A
They
to
might
point
not
B.
want to walk all the way out and around either.
That's true.
Well, yeah, I know that is.
Yeah, if it was a sidewalk way out there that would have to be lit because of safety reasons. So going through the complex is the smartest way. To me.
How much how frequently is somebody going to be coming down Lexington from traveling west on Lexington and walking around that curve and wanting to cut in through the property?
There may be a lot once that development gets in there.
Well,
Want to see it.
maybe.
It will be a shorter distance from the Meadows area to the high school or anywhere
It
else.
would be, I guess, yeah.
Passing through that direction, so see quite a bit of traffic.
Yeah. So
One thing, Richard, is working on our park. One thing that's really strong is the connectivity on the pedestrian trails. And I see both points of, even the architect, when we talked to him about it, yeah, they actually kind of want to encourage people to come through their complex and see the high-end scale living that they're proposing. But there's also people that don't want to, dodge cars and do all the things that you do when you have to cut through an apartment complex. So it really kind of gives an option. If you want to go around, you can go around and walk your dog or ride your bike or whatever. feel like the safety issue or the lighting is, we've got trails all over Soto and throughout Johnson County that aren't lit. So I don't know if that's, I mean, I understand, the security reason, but we wouldn't have to necessarily light the whole trail or really any portions of the sidewalk that go around the north side of the complex. So I guess we're kind of thinking we want both worlds addressed, and that's why we've talked about having that northern sidewalk in.
I would hesitate personally to route them through the facility because you got a curb, you got a front tires hitting the curb, you got an overhang, you got buildings respectfully, it just doesn't seem right.
They don't have to walk through there if they don't want
Well,
to.
that's why I think the sidewalk around the perimeter that is discussed right here, connecting the west to the east that loops around the site, number 4. I would think that should occur.
How long distance we talking? Do anybody know? Roughly.
Let's see. This is going to be very rough. It's like about 1,300 feet, maybe. 1,300 feet.
At 6 foot wide?
I'll offer my opinion on this. If somebody wants to walk around the north side, they can travel up to the north to Lexington Avenue and travel around the existing sidewalk that's there, as opposed to walking through the property and making the property developer put in an additional sidewalk that may not be necessary. Just my 2 cents.
Okay.
Well, whoever makes the motion, then item 4 on page 2 of 2 can be in the motion or not in the motion. And so we're all on board. An entrance feature on 90th Street is included in the area between the railroad tracks and Building 2. Can you point that out to us on?
I'm sorry, say that again.
Item number 3, an entrance feature on 90th Street is included in the area between the railroad tracks and Building 2.
So we're talking about this area, essentially the area that is the railroad spur tract. There's quite a bit of, there's a detention or the stormwater drainage area through there now. That's where this treat area is, and there's a pretty substantial ditch that runs through here now that'll be routed essentially along the rail spur. And talking with the architect, initially there were some plans for a water feature, some sort of a stormwater retention area, but those were since taken off of the plans because they didn't want to be tied to a specific entrance feature there, but they did talk about landscaping and some other maybe some other beautification efforts there as you come onto the property. So I think that's what that's getting at. Right.
Mitigating the water better.
That's right. That's right.
So that's why we didn't see the need any longer.
Okay. The water. Right. We didn't get into the stormwater, but it again, it was one of these that was addressed back at the time, and actually in 2001, there's a regional stormwater detention facility that's constructed on this land to be dedicated. It's right here, just adjacent to Commerce Drive. If you drive down there, you see an embankment that's there. That will, in a big rain, hold water back up into this area. When that was designed, it was designed for the previous apartment complex. At that time, we had more stringent runoff requirements than we have now, actually. They were actually relaxed a little bit in the last 15 years. So according to today's standard, that detention facility provides way more protection than it would if it were built today. So I think that's what the applicant realized during the process, that they didn't need those other detention areas.
So back to the entrance feature. Is that something staff would work out, or is that gone? No, number 3 on page 2 of 2,
That's something we would work with the applicant on, but, you know, you can tell when you look at the architectural detailing of
Okay.
the buildings and the site plan itself, but I'm certainly confident we're gonna come up with something that'll work well in that area.
Yeah, and again, I think this is another one that this is really kind of outside of what the requirements. If we're just checking off boxes here in the site plan regulations, there isn't a box for this entrance.
Entrance features, yeah. Well, as long as they don't have to wear hip waders to walk through there, right?
Right.
Okay. And this entrance feature is going to be more than a cattle guard. It's a
Yes.
joke. Never mind. Okay. Okay. So item 2, the privacy fence. We talked about that. That'll be, staff will work that out with the applicant. I mean, I'm just talking about the motion here. Looking at these 4 items. The 4 requirements. And item 1 is the parkland shown on the site plan is dedicated in fee simple title to DeSoto prior to issuing. Yes. Okay. So those are all pretty much still good. And whoever makes the proposal, the motion.
Yeah, I don't know if we had complete consensus on number 4, and then number 2. We talked about wordsmithing number 2 a little bit. Rather than saying the privacy fence, I'm thinking that number 2 states something along the lines of that the applicant must address the buffering at the southern boundary of the project to be determined by city staff before occupancy permits given. Is that something to that effect? Just to remove the particulars of the fence.
A buffering of some type, basically.
Yes.
Determined it between everybody that it is needed.
Right. So just address the buffering to be determined by staff.
So number 2 would be wordsmith to address buffering. Staff and applicant to address buffering.
Yeah, so it would say the applicant must address the buffering at the southern boundary of the project to be determined by staff before the occupancy permit's given to the villas in Building 5.
And you have
That's
that down.
Well, no, because I was just going to say to follow the conditions of staff's recommendation on page 2, but in the conclusion, but if y'all are changing it around.
We are.
We're changing,
We're gonna have to
yeah.
state
We
each
need-
one specifically. Everything else stays the same.
Yeah, and then I think item 4 we're still kicking around.
I'll start typing.
And I guess item 4 would be whoever wants to make the proposal that we do the extra sidewalk or not. And then we can vote on it. Unless we want to, I mean, let's do a sidewalk opinion now to make the whole process go smoother. I think we should have it. An
I think it
opinion.
would be nice, but I think it's going to be very expensive, and I'm not sure how much use it's going to get. 1,300 feet of 6-foot concrete, 4 inches thick, 6 inches thick.
4 is the standard.
4.
Yeah.
That's a lot of concrete.
Yep.
Yeah, can you give us a rough idea of what it might cost?
No, I can't.
Okay, all right, no blame. What do you think the powers to be would think about putting in a sidewalk
that long?
Obviously, we'd rather concentrate on the amenities themselves. This is about a $55 million investment for the community as it sits right now. You know, obviously, with the way this is budgeted, something else is going to have to give with the building itself for that budget money to come out of that. Along the railroad tracks, there are a number of gullies and swales that are going to generate additional retaining walls and various grading mitigation to also make that.
Totally understand. I'm going to keep thinking.
Okay.
Could this be made not as a sidewalk, but as a trail made out of asphalt and culvert pipes?
Could it? Sure. Yes, it could.
I mean, would obviously be far cheaper.
Right.
It may not meet the intent of the owner's property.
It gives a hard surface for people to walk on.
We've done asphalt and then we've also done mulch before as well. However, due to the grading that's there, it will be not long before that's getting washed away. Yeah, and so it would become more of a maintenance eyesore than.
I've never been back to there, so I had no idea. I
Yeah.
just know a lot of trails made out of asphalt, out of asphalt.
You're correct.
Yeah.
You're correct. But again, we would rather, you know, be concentrating the money and efforts on the community at large and you know, making it as nice as possible, landscaping, you know, hopefully consideration given for the you know, addressing the entry monument, which of course we do want to do because we want the entry to the neighborhood to be spectacular. You know, any of the other things that we mentioned that we want to go above and beyond.
Maybe a half measure is a dedication of an easement, a pedestrian easement, for the city to construct a trail in the future.
I like that.
That would be a nice.
Yeah.
That would be agreeable.
I can't take credit for that one. That was Rick's suggestion.
But that would
All
be
right.
agreeable.
Yeah, that would solve both problems.
Yes, sir.
Okay, so the item 4.
You know you're going to have to make this motion because you're the only one that's remembered all this.
I'm getting it.
She's got it.
Lana's getting it down.
Okay.
Thanks.
It would basically be an easement for a
Dedication.
trail or
Future
or similar.
Yeah.
A trail or similar. Could be a sidewalk, could be a trail, could be, you know.
We'll
some
probably have an ideal somewhere down the line because people will go that way.
There'll be a path.
There'll be a
Yeah.
path.
Yeah,
And if there's a
correct.
path there, we know there is a need. If there's no path, then we know we don't need a trail.
That is,
Makes sense.
that's right.
Yeah.
There's something to follow.
They show up, if the number of kids start showing up at school with muddy feet, then they'll,
We'll have to have somebody out there to watch it.
yeah, okay.
Yeah, no, that would work.
Okay, so Lana, are you good with a,
Okay, I'm going to read these back to you so
All right.
you all have the idea of what it says. So the conditions are, number 1, the parkland shown on the site plan is dedicated in fee simple title to DeSoto prior to issuing an occupancy permit before the first building is completed. Okay, number 2, the applicant must address the buffering of the southern boundary of the project to be determined by city staff before an occupancy permit is given to the villas and building 5. Number 3, an entrance feature on 90th Street is included in the area between the railroad tracks and building 2. And number 4, the applicant must dedicate a pedestrian easement along the north and west side of the site. Thanks, Mike.
Okay.
okay, in general, it is found that the site plan submittal meets the requirements found in Article 11. Just so everybody know, you know, meaning it meets our requirements. Consistent with the intent of the City of DeSoto site plan requirements, City Code gives Planning Commission the latitude to make judgments on the general nature and accessibility of the proposed site plan, meaning these 4 criteria. And I don't know if anybody else has any thoughts on the public health, safety, and welfare of DeSoto. If not, those are what those 4 items were to address. And can't think of anything else unless.
I'm good.
So somebody, it's simple, just I motion that we recommend approval to the,
Multifamily development.
for the Country Village.
We don't recommend approval.
We're not recommending.
You're approving.
We're
We're approving it.
Okay. That we approve the
All right, I'll make a motion.
site plan for the Country Village Apartments.
Make a motion that we approve the site plan for Country Village Apartments with the corrected 4 items on page 2. As what?
I'll second that.
Thank you.
Okay, we have a motion and a second.
Yes,
Can
and
we-
those items are specifically set forth as part of the motion, just so all of you and the audience are aware of that. What I read to you is within the context of the motion.
Yes. Okay, any final discussion? Any thoughts?
We have to vote, there's a motion.
We have a motion
Second.
and a second. Final words before we vote. None? All right, can we have a roll call vote, please?
Manson,
Yes.
Garrett,
Yes.
Schultz,
Yes.
Lane,
Yes.
Chairman,
Yes.
McPherson.
Yes.
Thank you, commissioners. The motion carried.
All right, woo-hoo. Okay. That concludes the majority of the main part of our meeting. The calendar on December 6th is city council meeting here at City Hall at 7 p.m. December 20th is another city council meeting, and our meeting for the 25th has been canceled. And so I guess, is there a motion to adjourn?
Second.
All in favor, say aye. Aye. Sorry. Yeah. Well, whew. That was, yeah, man, 350. Yeah.
To have seen the.
Oh, I need to stop the video.